An immigrant eager to reunite with her quarantined sister is deceived by a businessman who puts her into a compromising situation. Two Catholic women from Poland arrive at Ellis Island by ship, seeking to reunite with their relatives in Brooklyn and begin anew. While waiting to disembark, Eva advises her younger sister Magda to suppress her coughs to avoid being quarantined. Unfortunately, the lady cannot conceal her illness, drawing the officer's attention. As a former nurse, Eva asserts that her sister is healthy. Nonetheless, the man explains that her sibling will stay in the infirmary for 6 months. He warns that if Magda's condition doesn't improve, she might face deportation. While being escorted away, the unwell woman advises her sister to proceed without her. Eva, however, pledges to return for her. The immigrant then advances to the inspector but is accused of having low morals. She denies it, explaining her plan to reside with her aunt and uncle in Brooklyn. Regrettably, the man reveals that her relatives failed to appear, and the provided address doesn't exist. Consequently, the man deems her at risk of becoming a public charge, a circumstance that could result in deportation. In the exclusion line, Eva encounters Bruno, a Jewish businessman posing as a Travelers Aid Society member. Leveraging her fluency in English, she asks him for assistance, leading him to bribe the officer for her release. Afterward, he advises her to meet him on the ferry bound for New York. Later on board, Eva is troubled by the thought of leaving Magda in the infirmary. In response, the man assures her that her sister will receive the best medical care. Upon arriving in New York, Bruno takes the immigrant to a boarding house, providing her with accommodation. While there, she meets Sonia. After the man leaves, Eva becomes curious if Sonia is Bruno's daughter, but the girl clarifies that she lives across the hall. This revelation leaves the woman uncertain and paranoid, prompting her to secure a sharp weapon and conceal it under her bed. The following day, the immigrant wakes up, and Bruno greets her, mentioning she slept for 13 hours. He then hands her a telegram, conveying the distressing news that Magda has tuberculosis. Additionally, the man discloses that he can assist in getting her sister out of Ellis Island, but it will be challenging and expensive. Eva expresses the need to find a job to earn money for her sister's release. In response, Bruno offers her a seamstress position in his theater business. He then directs her to the bathhouse across the street for a refreshing cleanup. There, the woman meets Clara, who presents her with a banana, a gift from Bruno. During their conversation, she speaks about Magda, who was detained on Ellis Island. Upon hearing this, Belva points out that freeing the immigrant's sister is possible but would need lots of money. She knows this because Bruno assisted her brother in escaping the island. After her bath, Eva goes to the theater, and Bruno directs her to Rosie, the owner, for a seamstress position. However, Rosie insists that the woman should be dancing, not making garments. The Jewish businessman then asks Eva to excuse them for a moment. While they talk, the immigrant overhears him describing how special she is. At dinner, Bruno introduces the immigrant to the other performers, praising her bravery in escaping Poland. Following this, two men arrive, identified as friends of the police commissioner. Shortly after, Rosie announces that there will be a prize for a pageant, urging everyone to contribute money to the hat. The guests would select the winner, and the best girl would receive all the money. Confused by all this, Eva refrains from putting any cash in the hat. When Belva notices, she explains to the immigrant that she can't participate in the pageant without contributing. Later, as the performers captivate the guests, the immigrant, lacking funds, discovers the money stashed nearby and discreetly takes some. Returning home after the event, Bruno becomes curious about Eva's background. She reveals that soldiers beheaded both of her parents in front of her and Magda. Upon hearing the unfortunate story, the businessman attempts to hug the woman, only to be met with her command not to touch her. Due to her reaction, Bruno raises his voice and admonishes her, accusing her of stealing from people trying to help her. He then calls for Belva, and Eva tearfully returns the money to her. The businessman then calms down, empathizing with the immigrant's desperation. After forgiving her, he mentions that he'll assist her to earn money, but she needs to beat the theater the following day for rehearsal. He explains that the other women will help her to learn to dance. Left with no choice, the tearful immigrant agrees. The next day, Bruno launches the show and introduces the exotic performers. It's revealed that Eva is the main event, and the other ladies persuade her to have a few drinks before going on stage. The businessman congratulates his new dancer for a captivating performance after the show. Suddenly, a garment maker named Oscar Straub approaches him, expressing his admiration for the show. He then introduces his son Leo, whom he considers effeminate and needing care. When the garment maker chooses Eva to entertain his son, Bruno declines, citing that the dancer is new. Regardless, the old man provides an advance payment, and the businessman advises the inebriated performer to go home. Later in the apartment, Eva awakens when Bruno brings Leo to the room. After the theater manager leaves, the man attempts to touch the woman, but she retreats. Learning her reaction, Bruno steps in and reminds the dancer about earning money for her sister Magda. With no choice, the immigrant allows herself to engage with the customer. The next day, Eva declines to eat, still troubled by her role as a courtesan. The Jewish businessman gives her money, and she accepts it. He emphasizes that Eva must continue for a considerable time to be able to pay for her sister's release. The woman understands the situation but expresses her resentment, stating that she hates him for putting her in such a situation. Bruno then clarifies that he's assisting her, unlike the immigrant's uncle who failed to show up for them. He discloses that he's familiar with her relatives because he examined her file before leaving Ellis Island. Following this, the intoxicated businessman and the performer return to the apartment. Upon entering, he stumbles, expressing his love for her. The woman disregards this and goes straight to her bed. She retrieves her bag from underneath it and gets her sister's letter. Hopeful, Eva ventures out and seeks directions from people to her relatives' location details. Soon, she locates the house and encounters her Aunt Editha, who welcomes her and discloses that she's been searching for her. Shortly after, her uncle Wojtek greets her. Later, the immigrant discovers the truth. Her uncle did go to Ellis Island to see them, but the officers lied. After this, she informs them about Magda, who's been held in the infirmary due to tuberculosis. She expresses hope that they can assist in getting her sister out. Editha and her husband permit their niece to stay. Before Eva sleeps, Wojtek reassures her that she'll meet a good man and marry soon. After dozing off, the woman dreams of her sister fading into the field. Unfortunately, when the immigrant wakes up the following day, two officers arrive and inform her that she'll be deported. It turns out that Wojtek reported her because the men at Ellis Island informed him of her actions on the ship. He explains that he didn't want his good name tarnished by his niece's perceived low morals. The immigrant denies the accusation, and despite Editha's intervention, the uncle insists that his decision is final. Consequently, Eva is brought back to Ellis Island for her deportation hearing. She attempts to ask the officer if she can see Magda, but he simply advises her to attend the show for the detainees, suggesting that if her sister's well, she might be there. In the cell, she encounters a woman who discloses they're being mistreated as if they're nothing. Eva asserts that she's not nothing and then stands in front of the mirror. She pricks her finger and uses her blood as a cheek and lip tint. After this, she goes to the door and sees someone carrying a cross, prompting her to pray to find Magda. That evening, the detainees are assembled to watch the show of Orlando the magician, who performs the magic of levitation. As the performance unfolds, Eva scans the crowd to find her sister. She identifies a woman who resembles Magda but quickly realizes her mistake upon approaching her. Upon returning to her seat, the immigrant continues to watch the show and applauds when Orlando disappears from inside the coffin after being shot and reappears in the back of the audience. The magician then notices her in the seat and pauses to give her a white rose, admiring her beauty. Following his performance, the illusionist introduces Enrico Caruso, an opera singer who captivates the crowd with his voice. As Eva watches, the magician glances at her, expressing interest. Later, while sleeping in her cell, the detainee is awakened by Bruno's arrival, who has learned about what Wojtek did to her. Desperate to earn money for her sister's release, the immigrant decides to rejoin the businessman and continue working as a courtesan. After spending time with the client the next day, Eva goes to the theater and surprisingly finds Orlando on stage. Shortly after, Bruno arrives and is in shock. He questions Rosie about why she rehired the magician. The owner points out that Orlando brings in a lot of customers, but Bruno argues that the exotic dancers can achieve the same result. Shortly after, Emil, the magician's real name, greets his cousin and expresses excitement about working with him again. He promises this time that he won't indulge in excessive betting and drinking to avoid sabotaging the show like last time. Unexpectedly, the illusionist spots Eva behind the businessman. However, just as he attempts to approach her, Bruno excuses himself and shuts the door on him. In his show, Orlando brings the immigrant on stage as a volunteer. He interviews her before performing a mind-reading magic trick. However, when Eva reveals she came to America for happiness, some people in the crowd catcall her. Upon hearing this, the magician quietly advises Eva to disregard the comments of the intoxicated men. However, he promptly removes her from the stage as the audience hurls objects at them. This leads to Bruno becoming upset and accusing Emil of using Eva for revenge. Perplexed, the magician is unaware of what he's alluding to and turns to the immigrant, inquiring about her well-being. Upon witnessing the scene, Bruno punches his cousin for speaking with the exotic dancer, triggering a brawl that spreads into the audience. Rosie steps in and swiftly fires the businessman for causing trouble in the theater. Consequently, the performers, particularly Eva, are distressed as they lose their means of income. The immigrant confronts Bruno for instigating a fight with his cousin, but he defends his actions, claiming he protected her when the magician humiliated her on stage. The next day, the businessman takes the women uptown to attract new customers. A teenager books Eva, and upon being alone with him in the boarding house, she discovers that Emil arranged for them to meet there. Subsequently, the magician apologizes for involving her in the stage act the night before. Shortly after, he expresses curiosity about how she came to work for his cousin. Eva explains that her relatives abandoned her, and Bruno intervened to prevent her deportation. Emil sympathizes with her, affirming her right to pursue happiness. Meanwhile, realizing that the teenager had stolen from him, the businessman rushes to the boarding house, only to find his cousin there. He asks Eva to give them some privacy for a conversation. The businessman cautions the magician against taking the woman. In response, the magician suggests that his cousin might be developing feelings for the immigrant and implies that it's inappropriate for him to sell the woman on the streets. Furious, Bruno tries to stab his cousin. Observing the danger, the woman hastily calls for police assistance, and they swiftly intervene. Later, Belva tells Eva that Bruno will spend the night in prison, and Emil has been released. Concerned about their income, the courtesan accuses the woman of being the root cause of their troubles, implying that the two men fought because of her. Belva proposes taking the immigrant's share to compensate for the lost work, but Eva refuses, stating she can't allow that. When the insulted courtesan is about to attack her, the woman threatens her with scissors. Shortly after, Eva returns to the theater and visits Emil, discovering that he'll be leaving for a tour. He invites her to join him, promising that she'd be his assistant. However, the immigrant explains that she can't accept his offer because she needs to stay and earn money for her sister, who is still in Ellis Island. Upon hearing her story, the magician empathizes with her. He also reveals that Bruno might have feelings for her, advising her to be careful. Afterward, he wishes her good luck and gifts her with his scarf. The following day, Eva waits for Bruno's release and accompanies him to the boarding house. Upon arrival, she observes him cleaning a pistol, but he assures her it's for their protection. The businessman then warns her about Emil, recounting an experience where the magician stole a past love from him, expressing concern that he might attempt the same again. On that Sunday at church, Eva prays fervently for her sister's protection. Unbeknownst to her, Bruno has followed her and overhears her confession with the priest. The immigrant admits to stealing food and money, and she reveals that men have coerced themselves into her during the ship journey, leading to her being labeled as a woman with low morals. Later, she reveals her shame for letting Bruno exploit her as a means to earn money for her sick sister. In response, the priest reminds her that she may face divine consequences. Still, he assures her that every soul can find redemption, emphasizing the importance of maintaining faith in her salvation. He advises her to find a way to distance herself from Bruno, but the woman implies that she can't do so. That night in the boarding house, Emil visits Eva, explaining that his tour's been interrupted and he desires to see her. The immigrant warns her to leave because Bruno has a gun under the night table. Upon hearing this, the magician swiftly removes the bullets from the weapon. Afterward, he shares that he has money coming his way from winning a card game on the train the previous night. He contemplates using the cash to assist her in Magda. Eva, feeling hopeful, pledges to meet with him the next day. Before the magician leaves, he kisses the woman, revealing his romantic feelings for her. Suddenly, she hears Bruno arriving and decides to meet him downstairs, giving the magician time to escape. The businessman acknowledges her lack of trust and suggests talking to his friends in Ellis Island to arrange Eva's visit to her sister. However, Emil overhears this conversation and intervenes. Bruno warns Eva not to trust Emil's promise of financial assistance, emphasizing that he can help her better because he has connections on the island. Suddenly, the magician approaches his cousin, pointing the handgun at his head and commanding him to release the immigrant. However, Bruno argues that Eva is not a captive, trembling with fear. Believing the gun's loaded, he reacts to the magician pulling the trigger by stabbing him in the chest. The businessman later regrets his actions and the woman panics. Unbeknownst to them, Belva witnesses the entire incident. To dispose of the body, the man places his late cousin in the woods. The following day at work, Eva remains disturbed by the previous night's events and struggles to perform her job. Suddenly, the police arrive, causing Bruno and the immigrant to flee. They discover a door in a tunnel and try to hide in there. Unfortunately, the policemen track them down and eventually find the businessman. As Eva hides in a dark area, she overhears the officers stating that they're pursuing her because she allegedly took Emil's life, a piece of information provided by Belva. The cops assault Bruno, demanding information about Eva's whereabouts, but he remains silent and they confiscate his money. Back at the boarding house, the injured businessman implores Eva to leave, but she explains that she can't as she needs to be with her sister. The businessman admits he already had the money for Magda's release but kept it from her because he didn't want her to leave him. Unfortunately, the police stole the money and he can no longer assist her. In response, the immigrant contemplates asking her aunt to help obtain the money. Upon learning this, he instructs her to meet him at the bar if she manages to get the cash so they can leave together. Eva goes back to her aunt's house and seeks assistance. She shares her realization that she had to resort to immoral means to earn money, questioning why survival is considered a sin. Edith clarifies that her husband is a proud man and she lacks the power to change that. Acknowledging her uncle's rejection, the immigrant earnestly asks her aunt to help with the money for Magda's release. The woman assures her that she will never be a burden to them again once her request is fulfilled. After receiving money from her aunt, Eva meets Bruno and they take a boat back to Ellis Island. While waiting for Magda's release, the businessman provides the woman with tickets to California, advising her to start a new life with her sister. Later, Bruno confesses his love to Eva and admits to paying the officers to prevent her from meeting her uncle on the day of her arrival. The businessman acknowledges exploiting her and urges her to leave the place to forget the things he made her do. Navigating conflicting emotions, the immigrant first strikes the businessman but then embraces him. Afterward, Eva is joyfully reunited with Magda and departs Ellis Island. Meanwhile, Bruno stays in New York, planning to confess to the police for his role in Emil's demise. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.